Thank you for joining us for another episode of Ask a Historian with Heritage Mississauga. I'm Matthew Wilkinson, historian with Heritage Mississauga. Each week we enjoy sharing and exploring our local history with you and look forward to having anyone send in their questions of things that you're interested in, things you're curious about, things that you've always wondered about and pondered their meaning or their name origin or the history of a site, a location, an event in historic Mississauga. Please send in your questions and we look forward to exploring local history with you.
Hi, Mississauga. My name is Natalie Hart, and I'm the General Manager for the Malton BIA, and I'm standing in front of the Westwood Square Mall located right here in the heart of Malton on Goreway Drive, which is open now safely for business with its retailers, services, and amazing food options available to you. Now, I want to ask a question, of course, about where our office is located. It's Victory Crescent in Victory Hall, which was built in 1949. But I think it'd be a lot more interesting if we could explain the ties that Victory Crescent has to the Avro Arrow. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing how you answer that question. Take care.
Our first question this week on Ask a Historian is from Natalie from the Malton BIA, and thank you, Natalie, for reaching out, and certainly wish you and everyone in Malton and all the businesses during this reopening and recovering from these days of COVID. Hopefully, the route ahead is sunnier, and wishing everyone well in Malton and of course across Mississauga and beyond. Your question is about Victory Aircraft and about Victory Crescent and its association to the Avro Arrow, and I already gave away part of my answer, but the association is not direct. Victory Village was named in association to a federal company that operated during the Second World War out of what is now the Malton Airport site, known as Victory Aircraft. And we'll get onto the connections to Avro Arrow in a moment, but Victory Aircraft came to be at the end of 1942 and to 1943 and operated until 1945. The housing development, the subdivision known as Victory Village, was a planned subdivision by the government to supply housing for a multitude of workers associated with Victory Aircraft. It was not the only housing subdivision site. In fact, there were several in Mississauga, including one in North Streetsville that was developed around the same time. But you have directly, in terms of Malton's Victory Village, its connection to providing housing for employees of the aircraft industry during the Second World War. The original Victory Village is a much smaller footprint than we know today. It consisted in 1942 of 5 streets: Merritt, Churchill, McNaughton, Victory, and Lancaster. I always find it fascinating to delve into the name origins, and perhaps even today when we look at the modern streets and people that might live and drive on those streets every day, we take them for granted but not really connecting to why things get named. There's certainly a theme here when we go through them. Lancaster, named after the famed Lancaster bomber, built by Victory Aircraft in Malton. 430 Avro Lancaster heavy bombers were built in Malton in support of the war effort overseas. Victory Crescent is named for Victory Aircraft, the company itself, which operated between 1943 and 1945, and many, if not most, of the residents of Victory Village, when it was first created, worked for either Victory Aircraft or one of its many subsidiary entities that were based in and around the Malton area, but most, again, connected to Victory Aircraft. McNaughton is named after General Andrew McNaughton, commander of the 1st Canadian Army during the Second World War, and for a time the highest ranking soldier for the Canadian war cause overseas and then again at home. Churchill might be a little more obvious, named for Sir Winston Churchill, British Prime Minister during the Second World War. And Merritt is named for Lieutenant Colonel Charles Merritt, Victoria Cross recipient, a prisoner of war, and someone who's viewed as a Canadian war hero during the Second World War. So that gives you kind of your nutshell, if you will, of where things get named. Incidentally, this all predates the Avro Arrow and Avro Canada, the company that produced it. They come around in the just after the end of the Second World War. the connection between that and your question of Averero, or perhaps more specifically AV Canada, the company that produced the Averero, comes from Victory Aircraft itself. The subdivision Victory Village built an association to employment for Victory Aircraft. After the war, Victory Aircraft is sold to AV Canada, a subsidiary of Hawker Siddeley in England, to take over maintenance of the Canadian bomber fleet, but also new research and design prototypes, which would ultimately, in the mid-1950s, produce the Avro Aero. So it's not a direct association; it's more proximity. But that being said, many of the employees who worked for Victory Aircraft continued on in 1946 and transitioned to become employed through AV Canada. So there is a link, and there were those who worked on the Avro Aero who lived in Victory Village, although again, Victory Village older than AV Canada and much older than the Avro Aero. So hopefully that answers kind of the specific question about connections between the two, but also looking at the story of Victory Hall itself, where your offices are located, a wonderful heritage building in the city of Mississauga, and something to be very proud of in Malton. Its early years are actually a little confusing. We don't know specifically when the building was built. There is some association that there are some suggestion or indication that it's built in 1940. However, it might actually be older, because there are some connections that it may be a relocated hall building that was then renovated, expanded, and repurposed. So in that case, it may date back as far as 1928, although its early years in another location nearby, but not there. So we don't know entirely for sure. I always say we're never 100% unless something is etched in stone, and that's not the case in this building. But we use the date 1940 because it kind of lines up with all the known facts of the building. So regardless of whether the building was built in 1940 or relocated and repurposed in 1940, it certainly seems to be that it comes to be a community hall between 1940 and 1942 in association when Victory Village is built. And the building itself, again, functioned originally as a community hall, known as Victory Community Hall, operating between 1940 and 1943. And then it served as an extension for the nearby public school classrooms between 1948 and 1952, and then reopening again as a community hall in 1953. So there really is this kind of historic building within this historic realm of Victory Village that connects to kind of the ebbs and flows of people, whether it be as a community hall, a place for social gatherings and dances and celebrations and a night out, if you will, particularly if you think of it in terms of active servicemen or pilots that are being trained, or specifically employees of Victory Aircraft and later AV Canada, as well as Arenda Engines and many of the other entities that were involved in the early industry up in Malton. This would have been a social gathering place, and then for a short period of time also a place used as a school extension for children within the community. So Victory Hall, formerly Victory Community Hall, very much tied to the life and times in historic Malton. So again, Natalie, thank you so much for your question. Wishing everyone the best in Malton, and particularly all the businesses as we reopen and kind of get through these times together, and hopefully again sunnier days ahead. So thank you, and keep sleuthing in Malton. We love chatting about Malton and exploring Malton's history. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Beatrice, Port Credit BIA's General Manager. My question for you is, can you tell me what year was the town of Port Credit established?
Our next question on Ask a Historian is from Beatrice from the Port Credit BIA, and thank you, Beatrice. You ask a question which has had some queries over the years, and we touched on this in another episode of Ask a Historian, but I'll delve into it a little bit more depth now. You're asking about when Port Credit was established. It's not an easy question because it depends on how you view what establishment means. Is establishment when a name is used in a vernacular sense, referring to a place name that eventually gets encoded on a piece of paper or registered with the government, and then officially something gets registered and begins to open and operate under that name. And so there's a number of ways we can look at how a community becomes established, but specifically in the legal sense, we have to look at the name of Port Credit itself. It's, again, not cut and dry because there are an official date, and then there are dates that predate that, and then dates that come after that, and I'll delve into each of them in turn. We do know that there is reference to the natural port at the mouth of the Credit River, i.e. Port Credit, in 1790. In the 1790s, under Lieutenant Governor John Graves Simcoe, there's a landing party at the mouth of the Credit River where canoes travel upstream, and eventually a government inn is established in 1796 on the south side of Lakeshore Road, adjacent to the Credit River. However, the name wasn't applied at the time. So when you look at those early documents, they talk about the mouth of the River Credit, Riviero Credit, the Credit River Harbor, but we don't hear the words Port Credit until officially a survey is registered by Robert Lynn. Robert Lynn surveyed a town plot on the west bank of the Credit River, south of Lakeshore Road, and that survey was registered on June 20th, 1835, as a town plot for Port Credit. And so if there is a date, if you will, where we can put cement this named it happens then, and a survey is completed June 20th of 1835. However, a survey, although it plans out a town, does not necessarily become a town. That requires some time to pass and some people to arrive, and plots to be purchased and buildings built, etc., etc. So officially the name is registered on a survey plan June 20th of 1835 by Robert Lynn. However, that's not the only answer to the question, if you will. The name Port Credit was actually used a year earlier. In 1834, something known as the Port Credit Harbor Company was formed for the dredging out and building of wharves and building of warehouses along the natural harbor itself at the mouth of the Credit River and south of Lakeshore Road. And this the Port Credit Harbor Company operated between 1834 and 1912. And so here we have, a year before Robert Lynn's survey, the name Port Credit is applied to a commercial or corporate entity, if you will. Again, that does not beget a town. The thing that would indicate that a town has come, and often what is seen as kind of the formal beginning of a town, is when a post office is registered, and that's when a name is applied, and people begin therefore using the name as reference to a place in which they live and where their goods and mail are to be delivered or to be coordinated with, if you will. Port Credit does have a post office date that is separate from the other, and that begins under William Rains on October 6th of 1842. So there, we've got three dates. One, not quite a date in fact, but the date of a company that first uses or is the first indication of the use of the name Port Credit. That is June 15th of 1834, the Port Credit Harbor Company. Officially, in a government sense, the survey is registered on June 20th, 1835 by Robert Lynn for the town of Port Credit. And then we have the post office itself, October 6th of 1842. The post office means that there are people there. The post office means that there are people engaged in daily life, in business enterprises, in communications with the outside world, and people that are saying, I live in Port Credit. So it's not, and I apologize, it's maybe historian's answer. There's not a single date, although if I had to select one, it really is the first registered document that would use the name Port Credit, and that was, again, the June 20th, 1835 survey by Robert Lynn. However, in practical sense, if you're looking at people on the ground and people engaged as a community and those saying, I live in Port Credit, then it would be the post office under William Rains, October 6th of 1842. So hopefully that answers at least a portion of the question. It doesn't give you a solid answer, if you will. And I wanted to mention there's one other thing too. If it's always a danger when you inscribe something in stone, and there was a town crest created just before amalgamation in 1973, and that crest etched in stone you can find in the Port Credit Public Library today, right inside the door, that has the old coat of arms of Port Credit, and may the light never fail is the Latin saying on it. And then underneath has the dates 1834. Always a danger when you put dates on stone. Hard to change, hard to argue afterwards, and that, I think, has given rise to some of the confusion as to what date are they actually connecting to. In this case, they're obviously making reference to the Port Credit Harbor Company in 1834, but that doesn't seem to support the idea of Port Credit itself as a community becoming established. So we often use the 1835 date as a first registered document, but again, you could also argue that the post office opening in 1842 is just as important of a landmark, or a date mark, if you will, in the evolution of Port Credit. So thank you, Beatrice, for the question. Wishing everyone well in Port Credit and all the businesses reopening now. All the best, and look forward to visiting your shops and stores and your streets in the near future as we reopen here in Mississauga. So thank you, and keep hunting the history in Port Credit.
Hi Matthew, my name is Amber Paytash, General Manager of the StreetsvilleBIA. The village of Streetsville is located in North Mississauga, and we are home to the highest concentration of historic buildings within the city. The StreetsvilleBIA represents 400 small businesses to date, and we would like to know a little bit more about the original business community of Streetsville. We would also like to know a bit more history about our beautiful office here at 280 Queen Street South. We welcome everybody to visit us in the village this summer, check out our shops, spend some time on our wonderful patios. You can find more information and a full business directory, including parking and maps, at www.villageofstreetsville.com. You can also check us out on social media at StreetsvilleBIA. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and we look forward to having you in our beautiful village.
Our next question on Ask a Historian is from Amber from the StreetsvilleBIA. And hi, Amber, and thanks for reaching out to us, and wishing everyone well and all the businesses reopening in Streetsville all the very best in these challenging days of COVID. And hopefully the reopening goes smoothly, and we look forward to brighter days, both personally and from a business sense, in the days and weeks and months ahead. Wishing everyone well. So delving back here, you're asking about the original business community of Streetsville, and I guess to answer a question like that, either a specific date comes to mind, or are we looking for a set point in time when Streetsville was founded as a village in 1858. I tend to look a little bit more broadly and think of the business community as it has evolved over time, and particularly some of those anchors within the community that have helped shape its course over time. And one major anchor is still on the landscape today, and I think has really solidified what the downtown core of Streetsville is. And that's the 1821 Barnhart General Store, known as the Montreal House, a landmark still within our community at the corner of Queen and Main, and still very much tied to the lifeblood of the business community of Streetsville. Mississauga's oldest commercial site in downtown Streetsville, the Montreal House. Next time you're in Streetsville and you want to walk in footsteps of history, walk in the doors of the Montreal House and think of the countless generations of people people that have walked through those very same doors. If only the walls could talk, or perhaps if only the floors could talk, the stories that the Montreal House might be able to tell. So the Barnhart store, the kind of the first commercial store outside of Timothy Street's Mills. Of course, Timothy Street's Mills are no longer with us, but the Mill Street, as it connected to the Credit River, is kind of the source of Streetsville's early establishment with Timothy Street's Mill. In 1823, a bridge over the Credit River on Main Street, as it connects to Bristol Road, was created. And incidentally, Bristol Road, named after a surveyor, Richard Bristol, employed by Timothy Street to bring a road into Streetsville. So really, Bristol Road is part of Main Street, connecting into the core of Streetsville itself. So in 1823, a bridge is constructed over the Credit River, and that really cements Streetsville as a major north-south and east-west village within Peel, or then for historic Mississauga, then known as Toronto Township. By 1828, the community added another general store under the direction of Israel Ransom. 1828, a Loyal Orange Lodge was built at the north end, as well as land donated for churches, one in the south, Presbyterians, later followed by the Methodists, and then in the north end, the Anglican Church, all established in the 1820s. By 1835, Streetsville had attracted many more merchants and tradespeople. The community was becoming a political and economic center at the time. The future looked bright in the 1830s for Streetsville. There were, in addition to Timothy Street's mill and tannery, there were additional grist mills and sawmills established along the course of the Credit River, both to the north and south ends of Streetsville. Just south of Streetsville was William Comfort's mill site, which was purchased by the Barber brothers in 1843. That's where Barbertown and Barberton Road, and of course the former William Barber House restaurant, now part of a redevelopment, is connected to the Barber brothers operation down in the south end of Streetsville. Jabez Barnhart founded the Streetsville Semi-Weekly Register, a newspaper, in 1843, and 3 years later, his brothers Solomon and John Barnhart established the Streetsville Review newspaper, the first weekly newspaper publication between Toronto and Windsor. And of course, with the newspaper becomes the advertisements for business, and really putting, again, Streetsville on the map. By 1850, with a population of approximately 1,000 people, Streetsville had emerged as the most populous and prosperous village in Peel County. I like those terms, populous and prosperous. Early directories in the 1850s, including Brown's Directory, list mills, tanneries, a foundry, cooperage, pottery, brickyard, blacksmiths, shoemakers, carriage shops, tinsmith, brewery, and we'll get back to the tinsmith in a little bit, a brewery, telegraph office, physicians, tailors, gunsmith, watchmaker, broom and pail factory, millinery, carpenter, furniture manufacturer, stave factory, bobbin factory, 4 churches, an orange lodge, and 2 schools. That's a mouthful right there. We have a major village that is established by 1850. Several hotels operating within Streetsville as well. And anytime you have multiples in the hotels, you know that the village is really booming at that time. You have the Telegraph House, the Globe Hotel, the Tyrone Inn, the Franklin House, which is still with us today, the Pacific House, and the Royal Hotel. The Royal Hotel, also a building that still survives today. The village in the 1850s and 1860s, it had its own baseball, hockey, lawn bowling, and cricket clubs, as well as an agricultural fair, which had begun in 1843, an established fairgrounds, a Streetsville Grammar School, Toronto Township's first high school, opened in 1851. In 1854, Farmers and Mechanics Institute was founded, which becomes home to the first library in historic Mississauga. So you really have these phenomenal periods of growth and early histories in the establishment of Streetsville, which I think are just fascinating to look at, kind of these early stories of the emergence of a community. And the intersection of Queen and Main is the hub of all the activity in Streetsville itself, the commercial hub, the the cultural hub, the social hub in the community. There was a band shell right at the corner as well, which becomes kind of that social hub within, and anchored on that corner, of course, is the Montreal House. Other historic buildings as well, including John Embleton's store, which still survives today. But the Montreal House is really what anchors that community. Again, began in 1821. By 1858, Streetsville had a population of 1,500 people and was incorporated as a village, our oldest village in historic Mississauga, and was coined as Queen of the County. Now, how's that for a little byline on your business ad? Home in Streetsville, the Queen of the County, and it was the most populated area in historic Mississauga. And 1951, the population, so just under 100 years later, the population of Streetsville was registered at 1,139 people. The village of Streetsville officially became a town on January 1st of 1962. And in 1974, the town of Streetsville amalgamated with the towns of Mississauga and the town of Port Credit to form the city of Mississauga. So Streetsville, an integral part of the story of Mississauga. So hopefully that answers your question about the commercial core and kind of the fascinating historic elements of business in Streetsville. Now specifically to your question on your office, a remarkable little building, we know it historically. Depending on the era that people are in Streetsville, they'll refer to it as, the old public library, the old town hall. Some people know it as the Streetsville Historical Society meeting place and archives, depending on again, when you're looking at the building. But we refer to it as the Cunningham Tinsmith Shop, which was built in 1860. Matthew and William Cunningham, which have houses just south, houses just to the west of on Berry Street. Their houses were built and they owned the corner lot and they were in the tinsmithy business, and they built this building that you're in today. Again, we know it as the Cunningham Tinsmith Shop. In 1902, the building itself became home to the Streetsville Public Library, which was a new location for the books that were collected as part of the Farmers and Mechanics Institute Library that was in the Oddfellows Hall. So in 1902, it becomes the Streetsville Public Library. The library continued in operation here until 1967, when a new library was built in the north end of Streetsville. Again, you can association to down Berry Street, you'll find the two Cunningham brothers' houses, now private residences today, in association in very close proximity to the work in which they did as tinsmiths itself. But your office, which was lovingly restored only a handful of years ago, the interior was redesigned to reflect some of the elements that were found in tinsmithy operations. Some inspiration was taken from the tinsmith shop for the interior decoration of your building. Some inspiration was taken from the tinsmith shop at Black Creek Pioneer Village, for example, and it was part of those discussions and some of the ideas that went into them. But they did a phenomenal job with the restoration of that building and opening it up for a new life. I know you love the building, and I encourage anyone wandering in Streetsville to drop in and see the offices of the StreetsvilleBIA in the historic Cunningham Tinsmith Shop, again built circa 1860. So for that, with that, Amber, thank you so much for your question, and all the best to everyone in Streetsville and all the businesses on these early days of reopening, and look forward to hopefully the festivals next year and bringing the hum to the streets back in Streetsville, and nothing like festival season in downtown Streetsville, and all the best, and look forward to wandering down memory lane and local history with you again. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephen Smith. We've created a new BIA for Cooksville, and we are really hoping that it's going to go well. Actually, we're very confident that it'll go well, and our goals are security and beautification for the area. My historical question for you is, where was the original fire hall located?
Our last question this week is from Stephen from the Cooksville BIA, and thank you, Stephen, for reaching out to us, and always enjoy exploring the history of Cooksville, and look forward to doing it again down the road, and wishing everyone well in Cooksville and all the businesses reopening during these challenging times, and wishing everyone all the very best. Look forward to seeing businesses in Cooksville down the road, perhaps another year, with the Taste of Cooksville and other events like that. So your question, Stephen, was around where the original fire hall in Cooksville was located, and it's not a quick answer, if you will. There were several different versions of facilities that were used by the fire hall, by the fire department in Cooksville, and we'll take a brief look at those. So the history of the fire department in Cooksville was the Cooksville Volunteer Fire Brigade was established by the Cooksville Businessmen's Association in 1935. However, there were references to earlier volunteer services for fighting fires in Cooksville. In fact, there's some references to just volunteers turning out with the ringing of a church bell to designate a fire back in after the Great Cooksville Fire of 1852. The interest in fighting fire was born. We know that volunteer firefighters responded to the Arundel Fire of 1919 that were from the Cooksville area, and so although Cooksville, again, they formally established a fire brigade in 1935. There are older roots to fighting fires in the Cooksville area. In 1935, Jack Braithwaite, one of the long-serving volunteer firefighters in Cooksville, was selected to be the first fire chief, and he served in that capacity for a number of decades. The first recorded purchase for the Cooksville Volunteer Fire Brigade was a 1918 Ford Model T fire engine, which was purchased in 1936. So they weren't getting sparkling new equipment. 1936, they're purchasing a second-hand 1918 Ford Model T fire engine. But it was the second fire truck in historic Mississauga, only after Port Credit's fire truck, which had been acquired in 1929. Over the many years after the 1935 establishment, the name evolved slightly. The volunteer part was dropped. It became the Cooksville Fire Brigade in 1942, and then the Cooksville Fire Department in 1951. In 1953, the Cooksville Fire Department merged with other fire departments in historic Mississauga to form the Toronto Township Fire Department, and Cooksville became a station or a detachment of the larger Toronto Township Fire Department. The first purpose-built building for the Cooksville Fire Department was erected in 1953, and its address was 17 Dundas Street East. So that was the first purpose-built fire hall in Cooksville in 1953. However, prior to that, the Cooksville Volunteer Fire Department had two other facilities that they used, both along here on Ontario Street. One on both north of Dundas Street, one on the north side, the earlier one, which was garages owned by Jack Braithwaite. Two garages were leased to the fire department for housing their fire engines. And then on the east side of the opposite side, on the west side, where the former Toronto Township Parks and Recreation Department was housed at what later became a Hakeem Optical building, which was torn down for the construction of the Cooksville Colonnade. They operated a garage there to house a Cooksville fire truck, and so you have these kind of loose associations of other sites. But the first purpose-built one, again, built in 1953 on the north side of Dundas Street, just to the east of here Ontario Street at 17 Dundas Street East. The building is no longer there. Again, it was torn down in the late 1980s, but that was home to the Cooksville Fire Department after 1953. So hopefully that answers some of your questions, and again, look forward to chatting local history with you down the road. And again, thank you for reaching out and connecting to us with a question on your community. Thank you.